Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Today, you'll find out how to start conversations with your dream clients and industry influencers, even if you have zero connections or a well-known brand. In this episode, you'll learn what a VIP prospect is and how they can change the course of your business overnight. Next, you'll see 4 powerful advantages behind building outreach campaigns just for 10 prospects or less. And finally, new and old school outreach tactics beyond traditional cold email, including how to use snail mail to break through your toughest gatekeepers. Enjoy. VIP outreach. This is the cast for you if you've got a handful of companies or people that if you could just connect with them, big things will happen for you and your business. These are the very important connections that you're hoping to reach via cold email. Today, let's talk about how you would go about connecting with these game-changing people out there. Before we just dive right in, let's paint the picture here. Like, what exactly are we talking about? Now, the genesis for this episode came about because not too long ago, someone had mentioned that they had a product that was very specific. It was only good for a certain type of company that spends a certain amount on online advertising. And they had basically identified 20 or so companies that could fit or that could be the best customers. These were their big deals that they could pursue. So we talked about some ideas of how they could pursue this short list of companies that if they were able to land a deal with them, mind you, these are companies that are really big, large budgets, like, think Fortune 100. And anyways, the approach to contacting and connecting with these companies was very different from a traditional cold email campaign that you might have hundreds or even 1,000 or so in your market. So this is what we're talking about. So maybe you've got a really long sales cycle that has big deals tied to it, or there's some influencers that if you could just connect with them, they could change the way your business operates drastically.
So that means that the pool of potential prospect I have is very small. And I can't really just have time for a lot of experiments, A/B testing and stuff like that, right?
That's correct. But just something I want to clarify is like, even if you're listening and you say, this isn't relevant to my business, I have thousands of potential prospects I can reach out to, consider the VIP person or people that you could reach out to. So Jeremy, even though there's a lot of people that could potentially be using, let's say, QuickMail to automate their outbound emails, there are still like VIPs that could be reached. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so some people who will then be able to influence a lot of people to buy QuickMail, for example.
Exactly. So it's appropriate even if you have a large market. This is just the approach you might take to contact with the most important people. The first thing that you have to realize is there's some disadvantages, but you have some advantages as well when you bring this target audience down to 20 or so people. So first of all, the disadvantage you have is you've got low numbers to work with. So if you only have 10 people you're trying to connect with, in order to get one of them on board, that means you must have a 10% conversion rate, which is, if you think about the deal size you're considering, it's significant. But some advantages that you have are one deal is a huge win for your company. So it just takes one to make a dramatic impact in your business. Next, you can afford to take a lot of time for each prospect. So normally you wouldn't be able to afford to fly to every city that your prospects are in, but with this small, highly valuable list, maybe that's an option. Also, since you can take more time, you might be able to use connections that you can build in sort of a longer term strategy. You can get introductions. And also when it comes to cold email, your emails will be super personalized, drastically different between every single prospect that you're sending emails to. And you're hearing also that it won't be automated. So it's almost a gift to be able to focus your efforts on one group, especially when they have the potential to bring out a deal size this large?
Yeah, that's interesting because usually one of the advice we give for people doing cold email to the mass is to think of writing an email to one person anyway. So I think people naturally find that easier. There is a lot of things we can do. You don't necessarily have to fly even. You can actually just say like, hey, I'll be there potentially at that time. And if they're not interested, then you just don't be there.
That's a super good tactic. I even wrote a little bit down in my notes, something like this. For those of you listening, we're talking about something I first heard from Dan Martell. He's basically said if there's a rock star that he's trying to connect with, he'll send an email saying, hey, I'm planning on being in your city sometime next month. Would you be around to connect on these dates? And if he can get enough meetings in that city, he books a ticket. And if not, he reschedules. So something that's good to keep in mind here.
One thing to keep in mind when we're contacting VIP is that it doesn't have to happen with just one email. So it's not like the golden email that you send. You can actually afford taking like 3 months time and then developing a relationship first before you actually go into the hard sell or something like that.
We do have the luxury of time here. We can go ahead and work on building a relationship via cold email instead of just going straight to the kill. Do you have any tips or advice for somebody looking just to create some kind of rapport with one of their prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is the first thing to do is really think deep down into what's in it for them before you even start contacting them. So it's fine, to take it 2, 3 steps before you actually go on the hard sell, but you still have to have in mind your end game. What is the value that you should create with building this relationship? Like, for example, if I go and contact Gary Vee, it'll be a great dude to hang out with and exchange war stories about, startup and get his thinking on stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I'm not really sure that it's going to bring something to my business, to his business. So, you have to be conscious about who you're contacting is not just for your ego or who you'd like to contact necessarily, but there is like a meaningful relationship or value that's going to be produced out of this relationship. Then that'd be way easier to have a conversation and bring that person to that stage. Like, for example, if I can open doors to a lot of potential prospect for him, then I think that's a clear value offering, right? It's like, hey, I got an audience that will be very interested in purchasing your product. Maybe there is something to explore together. Then that's a much better sell as to, hey, I just would like to hang out with you because you look cool on social media.
So making sure that whatever you mention in that email is written for that prospect, you're keeping in mind what they would be able to benefit from, not the other way around, how they can help you.
And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be email. I know this is a cool email outreach channel, and I think that definitely should be part of your strategy when reaching out to people, but it doesn't have to. Like, we were mentioning with Gary Vee, I'm sure it's more contactable by Twitter or Facebook than it is by email. So, just be conscious as to where people are and where they'd like to be contacted. In fact, there is like a really cool hack that I've heard about recently where someone actually purchased LinkedIn ads to the minimum level of company you can take in order to reach out to someone because he couldn't reach out any other way. So it was something like, hey, I'd like to pitch you about like a super cool company. Can you come back to me? And the ad was something like, hey, I'd like to talk to this person. If you know this person, please get in touch with me. And then people were like contacting that person and say, hey, dude, there's that crazy guy doing ads for contacting you. So, just be mindful as to where people are and how they'd like to be communicated to, because you can afford that when you're doing the VIP approach.
When you're contacting VIPs, I think a good step one would be to look at your network to see who you're closest with, or if there's someone that can make a mutual introduction between both of you. This is something that takes time. But again, if you only have 10 or 20 very important people you're looking to connect with, another way that you can sort of build a bridge here and get this conversation going. So maybe crawling through LinkedIn, seeing first who might be able to connect you, because that may be the fastest, easiest way to get a dialogue going. Could be as simple as asking a mutual connection to set up a call. And a lot of times that may be all that's needed to just get that first conversation. But a couple of things I've been hearing you say, Jeremy, is like, it's okay to take it off email or supplement your cold email outreach with social media, maybe even phone calls. Or there's a resource that I'm going to recommend. It's a book with a cheesy title, but a lot of good stuff in there. It's called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. And some of the strategies outlined in this book are old school approaches, but they're, for example, talking about how to send, let's say, gifts to that office to get conversations started, even when it's really difficult to break through the gatekeeper. And so there's a lot of different ways and angles you can approach this. Cold email is one way that should help a great deal, but also, like we said, social media, phone call, and maybe even mailing things to the company that can start this conversation for you.
And it basically touch upon one of the most important, powerful factor when we're doing VIP outreach is persistence. A lot of people will just stop at the first one, not getting a reply, then it's done. They may try a second one and then give up, kind of thing, especially when it's done manually. But really where the game is won here is, at the persistence level. And we are not talking about like annoying persistence, like, hey, did you read my email kind of thing? But it's more about like being thoughtful about things like, hey, congrats on your newly signed deal. I just want to bring back to the table the offer that we talked about with this new signed deal. Then obviously this will enable X and Y to happen. So maybe that's a good time to talk about. If not, don't worry, I'll be in touch with you next month again, or I'll reach out to you next year or whatever kind of thing. But if that person is a VIP person and your business is really going to benefit from a relationship with that person and their business could potentially benefit too, then you kind of own it to yourself to keep on pursuing and persisting to finally reach out and then reach out this initial conversation kind of thing.
Occasionally, the VIPs you have on your list could be companies. You're looking to get a deal signed from this company. And a lot of times, maybe they have thousands of employees and you don't know which particular person you should reach out to. So when this happens, I recommend pulling these companies up on LinkedIn and finding the employees that you're closest to and starting there. For example, if you happen to know somebody from college or from a previous job at this company, then this is your foot in the door, and don't ignore it. Take full advantage of the fact that you know someone inside the building who can then hand your contact info to the right person. They may even be able to help you identify who it is that this decision falls under. Even if it's somebody above or below the person you're trying to get on the phone, definitely starting with your closest contacts at that company is going to be the easiest way there, assuming you've got someone in your network. And if not, try the ask for an introduction method. So who do you know that knows that person approach? But again, luckily we have 10 or 20 people on this list. You can afford to comb through the employee directory and really think about your best way to connect with this company and get this deal started. Something that you don't have the luxury of in typical cold email campaigns, just because this could take hours per company and it's not always available if you are doing this at a higher scale or trying to automate some of it.
You can mix and match different strategies as well. I mean, nothing prevents you from sending an email to some of the people in that company and just ask, who's responsible for doing XYZ, which is what I call a go-to market strategy. And if that doesn't work, then, like Jack mentioned, one of the things is you could simply send a book and the address is to the person responsible for XYZ, that sort of thing. So you can be creative, and having more people to contact to just mean like more chances of reaching out to someone at the end.
I've got another resource if you're interested in putting together a cold email that's really personalized. We're talking about a different kind of cold email. There's nothing templated about it. It doesn't translate from one prospect to the next in any way, shape, or form. When you have 10 people that can change the way your business is run just by making this connection, you can afford to research individuals at a company, find out if there's shared interests. Maybe both of you are interested in space exploration or mountain biking or whatever the personal interests are, and just writing a custom PS or a custom intro for this person and mentioning specific details about the company that otherwise would be very hard to replicate in a campaign that was sent to many more people. And a resource I can point you to, Moz.com did an interesting whiteboard Friday on what separates a good outreach email from a great one. And it's pretty cool teardown of one of these highly personalized cold emails. Definitely worth a watch to sort of get a feel of how somebody used a lot of personalization to get Moz to endorse their brand. So it sounds like, and Jeremy, I'm looking for your take on this, we're probably recommending no automation at a list of 10 or 20 people that could make this big impact. Maybe they deserve a hands-on approach from day one.
If you want to be successful, and like we mentioned, if those 10 people can have the power to change drastically your business, then you have to be thoughtful about your approach and a bit more methodical. So although I probably wouldn't recommend doing automation because you need to pay attention to everything that's going on, I would still recommend having some reminder auto set. So you could use things like Boomerang or Follow Up CC, whatever kind of tool that helps you to remind yourself to follow up manually. I think that's keep the ball rolling. I think it's very important when you're at that level. So Jack, you mentioned that we need to find some common factors between the prospect and ourselves. And, you mentioned a few things that have nothing to do with business. So if I like motorbiking or, boat selling or space exploration and stuff like that, do you really think that this is something that needs to go into the conversation at the beginning when reaching out to someone, or do you want to keep it like purely business centric? I give you an example of something that works super well for me. And I don't mention, tennis, basket, whatever outside a hobby kind of thing. So what I do is I very often actually reach out on LinkedIn to founders in Zurich. So we could have founder dinners and get to know each other. And I just use the commonality thing. I think that's a very powerful influence factor. It's a liking thing. So we are together founders, we are both doing a SaaS, and we are both in Switzerland, close to Zurich. So I use those three characteristics and I go at the people just saying like, hey, I'm also a founder in a SaaS business. We're living very close to each other. How about, we just connect and have a quick conversation to get to know each other? And that goes very well and very easily. Do I need to go ahead and do all the, we also both like basketball or those sort of things? What's your take on that?
People listening probably won't have the luxury of being able to mention they share the same hometown and they're in the same industry. So we need to find ways to use this liking influence factor to help us build connections quickly. So another thing to think about is you're not going to always have the option to say, oh, I saw on social media that you're a big fan of craft beer. Some people, especially some people on your VIP list, may not have that much of a social presence. So you won't be able to draw these similarities out. I'm just saying if it's available and you do share something in common, work or personal related, use it to your advantage. It does work in much the same way as mentioning a shout out that you do share the same hometown. That's instantly, okay, this is not a total stranger. They live close to me. This is, okay, maybe somebody that I can connect with or at least relate to a little bit more than a perfect stranger.
And would you use it in the PS or in the content?
So it depends. The PS is probably a safe place to start if you haven't tried pulling in some personal information, adding it in the PS, just saying, hey, by the way, looks like we're both fans of snowboarding. Saw on Twitter that you were just in Vail. Look fun. Like those short things let your prospect know that you took a little bit of time to learn about them before reaching out. And that is appreciated. It's also really hard to automate. So not everyone is doing it. I would say most are not doing that. But if you remember, Jeremy, a couple episodes back, you got a cold email that said something like, hey, Jeremy, I'm not in Shanghai, but I wanted to reach out. I mean, I'm not even sure that flowed properly, but it did catch your attention and it did signal that, hey, here's someone who at least checked out your LinkedIn page and read through it and learned something about you before reaching out.
That's a fair point. I probably wouldn't have paid enough attention to the rest of the email if that wasn't mentioned at the beginning.
So it's not about being necessarily Sherlock Holmes and figuring out the lives of these people. In fact, that can work against you if you're a little bit too personal and creepy. My take is if they're sharing it publicly online and it's easy to find this information, it should be fine. But don't dig too deep or you'll maybe freak them out. But yeah, that's all we're talking about here is just showing that you're working hard to earn their reply and also that you've researched them so that there's a good chance they're the right person for this message. And also injecting some flattery doesn't hurt as well.
Fox and crow.
Yeah, fox and crow technique. So use it when you can if you are able to find some commonalities between you and your VIP.
That's an interesting point, actually. It's not because, you're reaching out manually and things like that should ignore all the influence factor that we talked about in previous cast.
I think actually it works the opposite. It's like if you're taking the time to write each one an individual cold email, you need to make it as best as you possibly can. If anything, because so much of your time is being spent on this, you want to give yourself the best chance of success and using influence factors, connections that you already have, different channels like social and phone and in person. All of these things are going to work to your advantage. One last thing from me, Jeremy. I want to bring up a point about putting all your eggs in one basket. We're talking about reaching out to a very small number of people in a highly personalized, hands-on way. Yes, if it works, that's a big day for your company, but I don't recommend relying exclusively on this tactic to grow your business. While you're reaching out, spending maybe an hour or two a day, writing these personalized emails to your VIP list, maybe connecting on social media, finding mutual connections. I recommend also having an outbound campaign running or some form of lead generation that is proven, that is able to bring you leads on a weekly basis so that you're not relying on this small batch to keep your business growing. This way, it takes a little bit of the risk out of the game while you can still sort of go for the fence here and try and get this big deal created.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that it's not because you got a VIP strategy that you shouldn't have, a strategy for other people.
I just see it as yet another growth strategy out there. And it's just more volatile, more risky than traditional cold email because the numbers aren't as high. You can't see your reply rates, your close rates, and know that you can get X many prospects every single week in your funnel. And so for me, it's more of a let's go for it. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our bread and butter, our leads are coming in through other channels that are more predictable. But by all means, explore these high growth, like big win opportunities, because every business has this VIP list. And maybe you haven't considered connecting with them in this kind of way. I'll add the book recommendation and a link to that whiteboard video so that you can take a look at some of these resources as you put together your VIP outreach campaign.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Well, these days, reaching out to VIP have never been that easy. But as we've seen on this cast, it's really no excuse for not putting in the work. There's 3 things you need to pay attention to. First, research. Make sure you pay enough time researching who you're contacting, what you have in common with them, and how they are connected to you. Second, a great value proposition. Contact people who will benefit from an interaction with you. It's way too easy to just think of yourself. And finally, persistence. Follow up intelligently and don't shy away from varying communication channel if required. With that in mind, if you're up for it, here's a challenge for you. Find one person that has the potential to drastically impact your business. Could be a reseller, a social influencer, or that marketing director that you'd love to be working with, and start a conversation with them. Win or lose, send us your email, podcast@quickmail.io, and tell us how it went.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.